cautiously, pushing his head inside and hanging up his lantern on the ridgepole nail. "I just looked in for a smoke, I suppose." He glanced round, caught the eye of Dr. Silence, and stopped. He put his pipe back into his pocket and began to hum softly, that under-breath humming of a nondescript melody I knew so well, and had come to hate. Dr. Silence leaned forward, opened the lantern, and blew the light out. "Speak low," he said, "and don't strike matches. Listen for sounds and movement about the camp, and be ready to follow me at a moment's notice." There was light enough to distinguish our faces easily, and I saw Maloney glance again hurriedly at both of us. "Is the camp asleep?" the doctor asked presently, whispering. "Sangree is," replied the clergyman in a voice equally low. "I can't answer for the women. I think they're sitting up." "That's for the best." And then he added, "I wish the fog would thin a bit, and let the moon through. Later, we may want it." "It is lifting now, I think," Maloney whispered back. "It's over the tops of the trees already." I cannot say what it was in this commonplace exchange of remarks that thrilled. Probably Maloney's swift acquiescence in the doctor's mood had something to do with it, for his quick obedience certainly impressed me a good deal. But even without that slight evidence, it was clear that each recognized the gravity of the occasion and understood that sleep was impossible, and sentry duty was the order of the night. "Report to me," repeated John Silence once again. "The least sound, and do nothing precipitately." He shifted across to the mouth of the tent and raised the flap, fastening it against the pole so that he could see out. Maloney stopped humming and began to force the breath through his teeth with a kind of faint hissing, treating us to a medley of church hymns and popular songs of the day. Then the tent trembled, as though someone had touched it. "That's the wind rising," whispered the clergyman, and pulled the flap open as far as it would go. A waft of cold, damp air entered, and made us shiver, and with it came a sound of the sea as the first wave washed its way softly along the shores. "It's got round to the north," he added, and following his voice came a long-drawn whisper that rose from the whole island as the trees sent forth a sighing response. "The fog'll move a bit now. I can make out a lane across the sea already." "Hush!" said Dr. Silence, for Maloney's voice had risen above a whisper, and we settled down again to another long period of watching and waiting, broken only by the occasional rubbing of shoulders against the canvas as we shifted our positions, and the increasing noise of waves on the outer coastline of the island. And over all whirred the murmur of wind sweeping the tops of the trees like a great harp, and the faint tapping on the tent as drops fell from the branches with a sharp pinging sound. We had sat for something over an hour in this way, and Maloney and I were finding it increasingly hard to keep awake, when suddenly Dr. Silence rose to his feet and peered out. The next minute he was gone. Relieved of the dominating presence, the clergyman thrust his face close into mine. "I don't much care for this waiting game," he whispered, "but Silence wouldn't hear of my sitting up with the others. He said it would prevent anything happening if I did." "He knows," I answered shortly. "No doubt in the world about that," he whispered back. "It's this double business, as he calls it, or else it's obsession as the Bible describes it. But it's bad, whichever it is. And I've got my Winchester outside ready cocked, and I brought this too." He shoved a pocket Bible under my nose. At one time in his life it had been his inseparable companion. "One's useless and the other's dangerous," I replied under my breath, conscious of a keen desire to laugh and leaving him to choose. "Safety lies in following our leader." "I'm not thinking of myself," he interrupted sharply. "Only if anything happens to Joan tonight, I'm going to shoot first and pray afterwards." Maloney put the book back into his hip pocket and peered out of the doorway. "What is he up to now, in the devil's name, I wonder?" he added. "Going round Sangree's tent and making gestures. How weird he looks, disappearing in and out of the fog." "Just trust him and wait," I said quickly. for the doctor was already on his way back. "Remember, he has the knowledge and knows what he's about. I've been with him through worse cases than this." Maloney moved back as Dr. Silence darkened the doorway and stooped to enter. "His sleep is very deep," he whispered, seating himself by the door again. "He's in a cataleptic condition, and the double may be released any minute now. But I've taken steps to imprison it in the tent, and it can't get out till I permit it. Be on the watch for signs of movement." Then he looked hard at Maloney. "But no violence or shooting, remember, Mr. Maloney, unless you want a murder on your hands. Anything done to the double acts by repercussion upon the physical body. You had better take out the cartridges at once." His voice was stern. The clergyman went out, and I heard him emptying the magazine of his rifle. When he returned, he sat nearer the door than before, and from that moment until we left the tent he never once took his eyes from the figure of Dr. Silence, silhouetted there against sky and canvas. And meanwhile the wind came steadily over the sea and opened the mist into lanes and clearings, driving it about like a living thing. It must have been well after midnight when a low booming sound drew my attention, but at first the sense of hearing was so strained that it was impossible exactly to locate it, and I imagined it was the thunder of big guns far out at sea, carried to us by the rising wind. Then Maloney, catching hold of my arm and leaning forward, somehow brought the true elation, and I realized the next second that it was only a few feet away. "Sangre's tent!" he exclaimed in a loud and startled whisper. I craned my head round the corner, but at first the effect of the fog was so confusing that every patch of white driving about before the wind looked like a moving tent, and it was some seconds before I discovered the one patch that held steady. Then I saw it was shaking all over, and the sides, flapping as much as the tightness of the ropes allowed, were the cause of the booming sound we heard. Something alive was tearing frantically about inside, banging against the stretched canvas in a way that made me think of a great moth dashing against the walls and ceiling of a room. The tent bulged and rocked. "It's trying to get out, by Jupiter!" muttered the clergyman, rising to his feet and turning to the side where the unloaded rifle lay. I sprang up too, hardly knowing what purpose was in my mind, but anxious to be prepared for anything. John Silence, however, was before us both, and his figure slipped past and blocked the doorway of the tent. And there was some quality in his voice next minute when he began to speak that brought our minds instantly to a state of calm obedience. "First, the women's tent," he said low, looking sharply at Maloney. "And if I need your help, I'll call." The clergyman needed no second bidding. He dived past me and was out in a moment. He was laboring evidently under intense excitement. I watched him picking his way silently over the slippery ground, giving the moving tent a wide berth, and presently disappearing among the floating shapes of fog. Dr. Silence turned to me. "You heard those footsteps about half an hour ago?" he asked significantly. I heard nothing. They were extraordinarily soft, almost the soundless tread of a wild animal. "But now follow me closely," he added, "for we must waste no time if I am to save this poor man from his affliction and lead his werewolf double to its rest. And unless I am much mistaken," he peered at me through the darkness, whispering with the utmost distinctness, "Joan and Sangree are absolutely made for one another. And I think she knows it, too, just as well as he does." My head swam a little as I listened, but at the same time something cleared in my brain, and I saw that he was right. And yet it was all so weird and incredible, so remote from the commonplace facts of life as commonplace people know them. And more than once it flashed upon me that the whole scene, people, words, tents, and all the rest of it, were delusions, created by the intense excitement of my own mind somehow, and that suddenly the sea fog would clear off, and the world would become normal again.